Welcome back, everybody. This is Pascal from Neutrality Studies. It is March the 31st, 2026, and we are joined again by Larry C. Johnson. Larry, welcome back.
Hey, thanks for the invite, man. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you very much for taking the time always in your late evening. It is, of course, still March the 30th at yours. Tell me, the last time we spoke is about 10 days ago. What is your assessment of the past week or so of the Iran war, and especially the kind of very erratic ups and downs that are coming out of the White House?
Yeah, if you're following Donald Trump, imagine you're sitting at like a Wimbledon tennis match, and boom, boom, boom. You're gonna have to wear a neck brace watching Donald Trump change all of his positions. I mean, he's all over the place, from right to left to up and down. The latest, remember last time we talked, Scott Bessent, the Secretary of Treasury, and Trump had lifted all the oil sanctions on Iran. Why? Oh, we got to get as much oil out there as possible. Got to keep the price down. Then today or yesterday, this morning, early this morning, Monday morning, Washington D.C. time, Trump is out talking about how he's not going to seize Karg Island and blow up all the Iranian oil wells. I'm thinking, wouldn't that reduce oil availability by taking all that Iranian oil off the market? So, gonna ask Trump, which is it? My favorite meme so far is Trump is laying on a psychiatrist's couch, and the psychiatrist is sitting there next to him and say, "So, Mr. President, these two Iranians that you've been talking to, are they in the room with us now?"
I mean, the whole idea of that Trump is actually doing diplomacy with Iran and that they have back channels and 15-point plan, 17-point plan, and everything is going well. Pakistan is helping. Things are winding down. I mean, it's all a ruse again. I mean, either it's a ruse, probably not even a ruse. It's just dressing up for the American public. I think it's just theater at this point, isn't it?
Well, it's theater, and it's also market manipulation.
Oh.
So this is the second week in a row that early in the morning, Donald Trump tweets, "Oh man, we're so close to having a deal. Peace is at hand." He's got his Neville Chamberlain, everything but the white paper in his hand, claiming that he's got a deal. And that's about an hour and a half before the stock market opens. And when the U.S. stock market opens, boom, boy, jump 600 points in the stock market. And I'll guarantee you somebody connected with Trump is making a lot of money off of that. So he's engaged in deliberate market manipulation because what he's saying is just flat out not true. I think in other quarters they'd call that a lie. There are no direct conversations with Iran, number one. Whatever conversations are taking place are through a third party. And previously it was Oman back in on February, prior to February 26th. And then today it is Pakistan, ostensibly. But they're not even full conversations because Pakistan will deliver the message, and more often than not, Iran is just saying, "We don't have anything to say to that, and we're not responding." So, and while all that is going on, the buildup of U.S. military continues. The movement of amphibious equipment to the vicinity to be used in an amphibious operation against Iran. I cannot rule out that they're going to actually try to take Karsk Island, as well as Omesh, and maybe Bandar Abbas. They may try more than one. There are really lots of rumors swirling right now, and you don't know how much of that is deliberate to create disinformation.
I mean, listening to you, I get this impression that, what they're doing right now is, again, they need a little bit of time in order to amass enough troops, in order to have a good shot at a ground invasion of some kind of strategic island or something that somebody sold to Trump would be good. And Trump says, like in his usual business attitude, okay, then let's make a buck or two while we wait, right? So just up and down and keep string the people along, keep the market somewhere where it is useful, and then boom, we strike when nobody expects it, and we're gonna laugh and we're gonna have a jolly good time when then finally all the dreams come true. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, yeah. They, it says art of the deal includes lying and getting your opponent off balance, lulling them into a sense of uh, where they think, oh, everything's okay, we're all on track, and then yeah, boom, out of the blue, you sucker punch.
Yeah, but at this point, you kind of wonder who's the enemy. I mean, because the Iranians understand all of this, they're prepared for it. They say like, please come, we are happy to obliterate you. I mean, if that's what you want, they almost literally say that. I mean,
You're right.
I can't but notice your cap. We the people are pissed off,
Yeah.
and we've had this huge march. A beautiful cap. We've had this march, these demonstrations in Washington the other day. I mean, is Trump at this point basically trying to somehow just lull everybody inside the United States into somehow just not rising up more because this seems to get bad?
Look, he's painted himself into a corner. The scapegoat so far appears to be the head of Mossad, and who reportedly had assured Trump and assured Bibi that the the Iranian regime was just a house of cards, needing only one strong wind, one good blow to fall it to collapse, and that the people of Iran would be walking to the streets to create a new government. Well, that turned out not to be true, and Iran had prepared layered defenses, and they are all disconnected. So it's not dependent upon just one node. It's a multi-nodal, or let's call it multipolarity defense, but
Multiple.
multinodal. Nodal,
They,
the node is a better image.
they call it mosaic. The term they
Yeah,
use is mosaic defense. So like the different parts of the mosaic like playing together in order to create the whole picture.
right.
Um,
Yeah. So um, they are Iran responded very rapidly and actually with a plan. They methodically took out all of a grand total of 13 different radar systems, ground radar systems that were critical for both keeping track of planes, missiles, drones, movements of personnel, movements of vessels on the ocean. And once that was taken out, the United States was effectively blinded. They compensated for that by flying in the E-3 AWACS, the one that was destroyed at Prince Saud Air Base 2 days ago. And so without that um, AWACS, because that AWACS was doing what the radars used to do. And so now once again, the U.S. forces that don't have the AWACS, they're blind. So they don't really see what's going on and what's out there.
Hey, very brief intermission because I was recently banned from YouTube, and although I'm back, this can happen anytime again. So please consider subscribing not only here, but to my mailing list on Substack. That's pascalotta.substack.com. The link's going to be in the description below, and now back to the video. With this, I mean, the situation now, 1 month after the first strikes, is in terms of military capability for the United States, it's definitely worse than at the beginning. The thing
Yeah.
we don't really know is how good the situation is for Iran. All we know is that they're still able to fire missiles, and more of them keep hitting Israel, of course, and the Gulf region. Now, if we're aware of that, then what could be a realistic scenario for U.S. ground troops to be engaged in Iran or on one of the islands? I mean, taking out trying to take out the uranium is I mean, this is stupid, right? That just makes no sense. But putting them there in order for them to be there, that also makes no sense because you're a sitting duck, right? So what in your mind would be something that you think the Pentagon would sign off to in terms of a strategic goal for an amphibious landing?
Well, there is none. That's the problem. So let's draw a parallel with World War II in the Pacific, to give an idea of when military action is taken with a very specific goal or objective in mind. And that was the invasion of Guadalcanal by U.S. Marines. The purpose of that was to seize that airfield, later known as Henderson Airfield, so that the Japanese could not use that airfield.
Right.
Because if they had the airfield, they would essentially be able to also control the sea around that island and up towards New Guinea, as well as towards Australia.
Yep.
So it actually had a strategic significance. So the military mission there was clear: prevent the Japanese from controlling that island, secure that island, control it, and have your own air power there. So that way, you now created some air cover around that island that then would enable in subsequent missions to be launched. You don't have that kind of clear objective here. Let's start with Karg as an example. What's the purpose there? To shut off Iranian oil? Well, Karg is not the only terminal that Iran uses to load oil. So seizing that will not achieve cutting off Iranian oil. What it does do is it puts U.S. troops in a position of great vulnerability, because they are on an island that does not have effective below ground fortifications and bunkers where you can go hide, and that is close enough that it can be bombed, strafed, hit with drones, hit with artillery. So whatever U.S. troops land there is then going to be into an immediate problem, because what's the end game? If it is the end game to hold Karg Island, okay, what does that get you? Bragging rights over territory? It does that doesn't weaken Iran at all militarily. Will it disrupt their oil flow? Yes, it will disrupt some of their oil flow, but they've got other alternatives. So that's not the only alternative. Um, let's drop down to Kemish. It's not quite an island because it is connected to the mainland, but it sits adjacent to the Strait of Hormuz, and it's a great location to monitor ships passing. There are 150,000 Iranians on that island. So um, if you take it, you're going to have to deal with that population. Well, if you take it with 10, let's say you take it with 10,000 Marines. I'm not great at math, but they're outnumbered 15 to 1 now, at least, or 150 to 1. So they've got a problem right away with crowd control. And if some of those Iranians have firearms, they're going to be taking pot shots at Marines. But you claim that the goal of that is to open up the Strait of Hormuz. Okay, what's keeping the Strait of Hormuz closed, apart from Iran saying it's closed and getting the insurance company say we're not insuring any ship? There's the risk of you've got submarines, many submarines by Iran that can shoot torpedoes. You've got underground, you got mines, you have underwater drones that can be maneuvered and hit ships. You've got drones that fly above the water. You have rockets, missiles. So Iran's got a whole series of weapons that they can apply, and none of the actions that the troops take there on Kemish Island solves that. So it's like, again, what is the point other than just flexing muscle and saying, hey, we can land here on Iranian territory?
Well, I mean, if you think about it in a sick way, one of the goals could be to force Iran to use up its missile stockpile to fire at its own territory, right? You put these 10,000 troops there. You tell them dig in. You maybe try to identify the bunkers that Iran built itself. You storm the bunkers. You use the bunkers for your own troops, and you would force Iran to fire at itself until it exhausts itself. I mean, I could think of people thinking in those terms.
Yeah, yeah, it is. Uh, Again, think of it in terms of what do you accomplish from a strategic standpoint with the military by having them there? What you create is you create a liability.
Yeah.
And the liability is, how do you resupply those troops?
Yeah.
You're gonna have to get those troops, fed. They require a certain amount. They require like 8,000 gallons of water a day. Where you can get that water from? It's not like you got fresh mountain springs running there. So,
A huge hostage taking operation, the 150,000 people you just spoke about, take all of them hostage and tell Iran you have to let our water and our supplies through, otherwise they die. And if you fire at us, we have our people in the hospital and in the city hall and so on. So something like that.
then you certified yourself. The United States will have certified itself as a terrorist. That's what terrorists do,
Yeah, but terrorists
because
don't
that
care
doesn't.
about that, do they?
No, they don't. Well, not in fact, um, even terrorists that have taken hostages, they usually take hostages for the purpose of using them.
Right.
But, again, in this situation, the ability of the United States to, um, hold those people hostage, good God, that's gonna be a horrific image, uh, broadcast around the world.
Well, I
It
mean,
is.
Hollywood, United States, CNN, MSNBC, they will be really great at saying the United States send its troops to defend the people of the island, right? 150,000 people are now being protected by the United States from the from the regime, right? They're now free people on the island, right?
Yeah, yeah. They'll try that, but you'll find that what happens when the Iranians start fighting back, which they will.
Yeah,
So, again, I return to this notion of it is think of it like if fist fighting. You don't just walk down the street and punch people at random. I mean, you can do that, but all that's gonna do is attract attention, and you're, ultimately gonna probably get beat up by an angry mob. That's opposed to stepping into a boxing ring with an opponent, and your goal is to knock them out or disable them so they can't fight back. Or if you're out on the street, you see somebody who's attacking somebody else, you wanna stop them. So in this case, what are you trying to accomplish with this show of military force? Because the size of the yeah, I haven't even begun to discuss the problem of how do you get the troops there? So
right.
the option one is you're gonna land them amphibiously. Well, Iran's got plenty of missiles, drones, and other things that they can attack that kind of force if it's coming towards shore. So you're gonna get boats sunk and sailors and Marines, or possibly, Army, drowning, in the Strait of Hormuz. Or you can try to insert them via, helicopters and/or, via, parachute. Uh, and again, the parachute is not a great option, particularly on an island of that size, and it doesn't necessarily get all of your people into the fight right away. It could if you did it by an act of surprise, but all this talking about it is drawing more and more attention, and it now, the Chinese, Russian intelligence officers, they know what to direct on and to collect on to share with Iran. So this is, now with all those negatives, and, the troops who are, let's call it the mid-level officers, I think they're just sick at heart now over this. They recognize that this has great potential to be just a complete disaster, something akin to the disaster that the Brits and the Aussies and New Zealanders suffered at Gallipoli in World War One. This could be the Persian Gulf version of Gallipoli, because once the troops are on land, then they got to figure out how to defend themselves, and then more importantly, how do they feed themselves?
Yeah.
Because normally, with like a beach landing in Normandy, in World War II, at Sword, Juneau, Omaha, Utah, and I forget the other one. Um, they're once they got ashore, then the logistics line started flowing in, which brought, they had fuel, they had ammunition, they had food to sustain the army so it could continue fighting and moving forward. You won't have that kind of sustainment for forces that land. I don't care whether they land at Bandar Abbas or at Kamish or at Karg or at some other location. The other issue is if you really want to open the strait, you got to guarantee that nobody can take a pot shot at a ship.
Right.
So you got 100 miles of coastline there. The United States does not have enough troops to cover that entire area and ensure that there's not someone hiding up there in one of the caves that is able to pop out and hit a ship.
You're right. As long as the risk of getting hit exists, the insurance
Mhm.
companies won't come back. They won't do that. I mean, if the risk is just too high, because it's all a game of statistics for them, right? For for insurance. But I just I just have such a hard time thinking that really, like, nobody has a serious plan. I mean, even if it's a sick plan, even if it's a twisted plan, there must be some sort of
Mm.
plan. Otherwise, it just seems like it just. I mean, even suicide bombers have a plan.
Did the US have a plan when it invaded Iraq in 2003? No.
Yeah, I mean, destroy Iraq, and they did so successfully, and they
Well,
got somewhere.
they get rid of Saddam, and then what? There was no plan for governing the country. When L. Paul Bremer, Jerry Bremer, who was a friend of mine back then, was named to be sort of the poobah of Baghdad, he went in immediately and disarmed, and fired all the Ba'athist, members of the army, sent them home. They had their guns with them, for God's sake. Well, gee, next thing you know, you wind up with this, rising tide of terrorist attacks or guerrilla attacks against US soldiers, and that continued for 4 more years, with every year the number of attacks going up. They started in, um, June, effectively June of 2003, and they continued to escalate well into the summer of 2006, 2007. So, and there was no plan then. They didn't sit there and say, "Okay, we need to have this person in charge of this and this person in charge of that, and this is what we're gonna do with the Ba'ath Army, and this is how," um, because at the same time that the United States was viewing Iran, even back then, Iran as a major threat, the people that we put in charge in Baghdad were beholden to Iran. You know, it doesn't make sense that, why if you're saying Iran's your enemy, your other enemy, then why do you put all of the folks who are sympathetic with Iran in positions of power in the new government? And, I think the Iranians themselves probably thought this gotta be some trick. They're trying to because like you, they're going, "Surely the Americans can't be this stupid." Yeah, 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 they can. Uh, I I used to do, the terrorism briefing and the, human rights briefing for a course called Senior Crisis Management Seminar, and it would bring government officials from, uh, a country. One time we had Saudi Arabia, another time we had Cyprus, we had Greece, we had Egypt, we even had Israel, Colombia, India, Pakistan. I did this course with over 80 countries. And the ones I dealt with around after the 2003 invasion of Iraq, what was amazing is regardless of language, culture, ethnic background, all of the foreign leaders that I dealt with, they they would come up to me and say, "Okay, what's the real US plan here? What is actually, surely they're lying to us about what they're doing right now, that they've got some hidden secret agenda." And I had to tell them, "No, really, we're really that stupid, guys. Please don't just because, we're pretty wealthy and we dress up well and we got a clean area in our city, doesn't mean that we actually know what we're doing." And we didn't, which is why it was such a disaster. And so I'm telling you, that's what's going on right now. There is not some grand master plan. Uh, they're trying to figure it out as they go along
Trying to
because
figure it out. They're trying to figure it out as they go along. It's like, this kind of in political science, we'll call it a path dependent way to misery or something like that.
Right.
But you just then play with what you've got. You just one day after another, and that makes it actually quite hard for any kind of opponent to figure out a counter strategy if there is no strategy.
Right. Now, the counter strategy for the opponent is destroy the American army.
Right.
You know, that's inflict as many casualties as you can, cause as much pain as you can, and make it as expensive as possible to the point that the United States will no longer be able to continue because and unless and until U.S. forces occupy Iran and are able to control all movement and allocate food and water and everything else, there's no way to that you can control Iran just by dropping bombs and threatening to drop bombs or threatening to destroy. It's one thing if you destroy a power center, and Iran's made it clear, you destroy ours, we're going to go destroy yours, and it's going to be worse for you. You know, you knock out the desalinization plant in Iran, and I've heard very numbers 2% to 8% of their potable water comes from that. But when they knock it out in Kuwait, where Kuwait's 90% dependent upon desalinization plants, and the one that was destroyed, I believe in Kuwait yesterday, accounts for 35% of their fresh water. So, you would think these things through. And clearly, the United States didn't even think through, um, the getting control of the Strait of Hormuz. If you're gonna launch a surprise attack on Iran, the very first thing you do is you move your naval force in, you secure that strait right away, and then you go out and start methodically being prepared to attack those targets. The U.S. certainly didn't do that. And now look at the results. You've got a global recession unfolding.
How is this going down now inside the US? And I know you're in Florida, not in DC, but I mean we've seen pictures of like pretty large protests last weekend in DC. Like how is the reaction now of the general population to this unfolding?
Well, right now, even the public opinion polls show the majority of Americans, well over 54%, oppose this war. That's right now. Once bodies start coming home in large numbers, and I'm not talking about two or three, but once the weekly toll starts getting up around 100, then all of a sudden there's going to be severe, serious backlash in the United States.
Um, so for the time being, though, it seems as if though all sides, including Israel, are just set to go there, right? I mean, the U.S., Israel, and Iran actually too says like, well, if this is what you want to do, then that's what's going to happen. I mean, we're not giving up. this we have a strategy and we're able to pull it off. So at the moment, looks pretty even on the playing field. Or how does it look to you?
No, actually, I think Iran clearly has the advantage. The United States no longer has secure bases that it can operate from in the Persian Gulf. Every single one of them, including the Al-Muwaffaq al-Salti base in Jordan, even that could be hit. The Financial Times yesterday published a piece saying, look, 80% of Iran's missiles are getting through. In other words, the combination Israeli-U.S. air defense system in Israel is only 20% effective, which means that's ineffective. So um, the economic problems that are now being created for the rest of the world is creating anger and unrest in those countries. And they're not blaming Iran, they're blaming the United States for having started this in most cases.
Yeah, and
And
we sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yes, no, sorry. Sorry. So it's just because we also heard the last couple of days that Iran is actually trying to figure out a system with which it can just let pass the ships of the people of the countries that it likes. Apparently,
Sure,
20 or
sure.
30 or so Pakistani flagged tankers already managed to go through. I think one tanker to Bangladesh was let through, and so they're trying to figure out a way to keep this sustainable, also toward the countries that they're friendly with.
Yeah, and they will try to keep it open in that regard
Mhm.
for as long as possible. Yeah, so one thing you do is you set up a basically another choke point in the Persian Gulf that all ships have to pass through, maybe, a 5-mile gap. And the Iranians with their small boats will go out and verify that, this boat, and they can also do it with drones. They can fly the drone out, look at the ship, see who it's registered to, feed that information back, get the certification the payment's been made, that whatever the toll is that Iran decides to exact, and then the ship goes through.
Right.
This would not have happened if the United States had not attacked Iran along with Israel. By
But
creating now this oil shortage and you got an incentive for people to try to some are desperate for oil. They got to get that oil. And so we've gone from a position where the United States used to basically control the price of oil to now it doesn't have that control. Iran has a large measure of that control. And they're doing it in tandem with China, saying, "Hey, you want this oil, you want to use this oil? Great, you got to buy it from China now,
right.
or you're paying Chinese yuan."
Right. And what I find very deceptive, actually, again from our Western media, is that they keep repeating this lie that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. It's not closed. The Iranians just control it. It's now Iranian controlled, and they're asserting that. But actually, what I guess in the country where I'm in Japan, people in a couple of months from now are going to get very, very jumpy and going to be probably willing to negotiate with Iran, saying like, "Look, okay, fine, we're going to pay, but just let our ships go through and us get some oil." But that is something the United States is interested in preventing, right? Actually, if they don't get oil, if they don't control it, then nobody should. So it's actually the United States that will make sure that the strait remains as close as possible to everybody in order to put all the blame on Iran.
And they can try to do that, but, right now, I think the majority of world opinion, or at least say among the Global South, it's entirely in Iran's favor on this.
Right.
And the internal situation in Iran it's being exacerbated by their decision to invade southern Lebanon and start fighting Hezbollah.
Right.
Um, I don't know, you're too young to remember the first go around in 2006. You're probably just a teenager back then, 20 years ago.
21. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
remember the things, but I didn't follow them close
yeah,
enough.
yeah. I mean, you're in college having fun, okay, which is okay. That's what you're supposed to do. Um, but the Israelis were quite confident they were going to sweep into southern Lebanon back then, vanquish Hezbollah, and get control of all that territory south of the Litani River. Hezbollah had, I forget how many years it had been since the previous attack, probably 12, but they were now prepared for the Israelis then, and they used bunkers, interlacing fields of fire. They had enough tank weapons, and they were able to hit both tanks and armored personnel carriers. And as I recall, they lasted about a month before they declared victory and retreated back into Israel. The level of damage that Israel is suffering now compared to then is at least twice, if not 3 times as bad. And one day, we never had a single example back in 2006 where Iran destroyed 21 Merkava battle tanks in one day, in one battle. So that itself is quite telling. So you've now got Israel completely stretched. And 2 days ago, a retired chief of the army, along with an active duty member of the Israeli Defense Force, um, were saying that, look, the red lights are flashing. We cannot sustain this. And Iran's going to, they're going to probably be the first to come out and try to cut a deal. But I don't think that deal's gonna stand. It's, uh, they're, um, the the Trump's desperation is evident by his pushing, saying, "No, we're close to an agreement," when the fact of the matter is there are no direct talks. Uh, Iran is talking, we'll hear from the Pakistanis, but doesn't always respond to their messages either. So Iran, I see, is gonna continue to push this to create an economic Armageddon, if you will, that will compel the United States to negotiate.
I'm just honestly speaking, I'm quite surprised that Israel is still able to do this. Even after a month, that they're able to open yet another front with southern Lebanon. That the level the level also of just attack that they're subject to is not enough to actually force Israel to say, like, okay, we need to stop this one way or another because we're suffering too much. I mean, during the 12-day war, it seems that it was also Israel that kind of said, like, no, 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 need to finish. We didn't manage to overwhelm them in the first week, so need to wind it down. And this time they don't. This time they go even further all in, and apparently, I mean, obviously they're able to do so. They have enough reserves. They have enough missiles. They have enough.
No, that's the point. They don't have enough reserves. So, again, the chief of staff of the army went in to the cabinet and said, "Look, we got 10 red flags right now. We don't have enough personnel. If we activate the 400,000 men we need, it's going to create major problems economically in this country, among other things." But you got two experienced military leaders saying, you know, this is lost. Um, so it may take another, uh, the level of casualties uh, Israel is encountering, that is experiencing this time, dwarfs what they experienced back in 2006. And those casualties in 2006 were serious enough that Israel pled for an agreement. And, a get out of jail free card from the United States, which Donald Trump played in using those bunker buster bombs that were dropped at Fordo, Isfahan, and Natanz.
And this time around, the Iranians don't let them get out of jail for free anymore. So
Correct.
yeah,
Well,
and Iran has said very clearly what its goals are, and until they're met, they won't stop. So and it seems, I mean, obviously, so far nothing worked to coerce them, right?
Trump's treating this like it's a real estate deal.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
that hey, the price on this apartment, this condo, is $5 million, and he's acting like the Iranians are coming up saying, I give you 2.5 million for it, and then they're going to haggle back and forth until they agree on a price. That's not this at all. This is akin to, and I've asked a number of men this today, so it's a sexist question, but it's sexist with a purpose. That if you had a daughter and the man who raped her comes to you and wants to negotiate, would you negotiate? Most men say, "No, I killed the son of a bitch." That's where, Iran has been raped violently, and not just the murder of its top leaders, but also the schoolgirls and the other children. And that is where, Iran's there's nothing to negotiate. Iran's position has been real simple. Lift all the sanctions, get your troops completely out of the area, pay reparations. That's the start. And then And only then can we start to have negotiations about how to end this.
Right. What's your assessment about, let's call them the Hexeth wing of the White House, the Christian Zionist fundamentalists? We've seen them praying by now several times. With the president, without the president, we've seen Hexeth giving like unhinged prayer sermon
Right.
kind of rally speeches to the Pentagon. It's like how big is that fundamentalist part of what probably the US is trying to do militarily?
Yeah, no, it's a significant driving force. Uh, but as I noted earlier, there's no popular support for this war. There are about 44% support it, but the vast majority are against it. And that's where Trump's problems are going to continue to escalate as the price, he tried to manipulate the market today. And when it started off at like 600 points up. And by day's end, it was up 41 points. So as the economic problems in the United States continue to mount, and then the whammy of inflation comes in, that Trump's position will be very tenuous. And I personally could see him at some point resigning because if he stays on through the elections next, I guess next November or in November coming up in the midterms, um, if he loses control of the House and Senate, he's toast. He is a genuine lame duck. And then the only game to be played at that point is whether the Democrats want to impeach him, get him, throw him out of government, humiliate him, but then have him replaced with a J.D. Vance who does have some competence and at least knows how to politically deal with people without it becoming, like Triumph the insult dog. Um, and I could see at that point the Democrats might say, you know what? Maybe let's just leave Trump around as a convenient punching bag that we can always riff off of.
Right.
Because he's not going to be able to get anything done. He can do executive orders, but those don't really have a lot of potency.
And maybe last thing, like the role of Russia and China after 1 month. What's your assessment?
Both are providing support, intelligence support in particular. There was a major, I learned today, there was a major cyber attack on the U.S., the Central Command and the other supporting commands throughout the military that are, when they're called supporting commands because they support what CENTCOM's doing and provide men, material, intelligence. Um, so Russia and China are providing target lists, I believe, and as well as providing other intelligence and providing material aid. Now, if people want to sit and pretend that this is somehow shocking and, oh, how dare Russia do that? Apart from the fact that the United States has been doing the same to Russia via Ukraine, it's simply when people, you can't remember, but you can read about it, that during the course of the Vietnam War, particularly after 68, you had Russian or Soviet pilots that were flying on with the North Vietnamese pilots. And they and it's a wall so US and Russia, the Soviet Union, they were in a proxy war,
Yeah.
literally like what's happening now. But that did not stop Nixon from negotiating with Leonid Brezhnev and creating a new arms control agreement, the strategic arms limitation talks that they were called at the time. And the United States, they found a way to compartmentalize, okay, we've got this proxy war going on here, but we've got this other diplomatic things we're trying to pursue. Uh, my impression of Trump is that's not how they're operating. They're operating, it's all black and white. You're with us or against us. And so to that end, um, I this war looks like it's going to escalate. I have picked up intelligence from another friend, a connected friend in Moscow, that Putin is telling people that he expects escalation, but also expects Russia to be in a position to try to de-escalate this. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean that obviously like there's so many unknowns at the moment that it's almost impossible to predict. But maybe very last point, over the weekend I was in the countryside here in Japan, and the TV was running the whole time, and they were actually Japan was still quite proud that their prime minister managed to go to Washington, and although there were some embarrassing moments, overall she managed to convey the message that there are things that Japan can do and that Japan can't do, and because of the pacifist constitution which the United States wrote
Right.
for them, right? And that apparently Donald Trump understood that and is not pushing Japan anymore to send ships anywhere. Do you have any indication of how the how this is being framed by the US? Is there any kind of expectation towards Japan to do something at this point?
So far, no. You've not seen the same criticism directed at Japan as it was directed today by Lindsey Graham at the government of Spain,
Uh,
because Spain told the United States, "Hey, you're not flying your warplanes through our territory anymore. You go around." And, that lit off a lot of outrage in America. Those damn French, like getting upset with them. But let's say they send warships. What are they going to do? Those warships are just going to be big fat targets. If they get in close enough to the Strait of Hormuz and are sunk, what have they accomplished? It's not like they're bringing fire, a magical weapon that can, sweep the hills, clear out every firing position in those hills, and ensure that there can be no fire from the mainland on the Strait of Hormuz. Heaven's sakes, you've got they've got artillery, they have long range drones, they have short range drones, they have missiles of a variety. So, Iran's in a position that it can fight and inflict a lot of damage on the United States, and that's the point. The United States cannot afford the damage of massive casualties,
yeah.
because that will further alienate the voting public away from Trump.
Yeah, but it seems if actually what we discussed about is what's really happening, they're just at the moment playing for a little bit of more time and playing games with the market while they are building up the forces in order then to put them somewhere. Then they're actually working on setting themselves up for exactly that scenario.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
well,
I mean, the the concerns I'm hearing expressed is we're really going in without a plan. There's the assumption, and this is where we sort of started our conversation. There's assumption that somebody's got a plan and is following it. Yeah, okay, the rest of the world will think we're confused, but, um, we're actually gonna be able to do A, B, and C. Years ago, when Ronald Reagan was in office, Saturday Night Live did a skit, and because it was rumored at the time, but it was also true. I had friends who had dealt with Reagan in their position. They were at State Department, and he was showing early signs of dementia. He was not mentally with it. And so a lot of times in public, he would appear confused. And what the Saturday Night Live skit did was they had they had this President Reagan talking to this one person and just, being very light and airy, and sort of absent-minded, and then the person leaves, and as soon as the door shuts, the demeanor of Reagan changes. "Okay, let's get over here. Now we're gonna start with this plan A, and we're gonna follow this here, and we need the logistics over there." And, it's this massive, he's like Henry Ford setting up a mass production factory. Uh, that's not what's going on here. It's
right.
not you close the door and all of a sudden Trump becomes,
Muscle man.
Charlemagne.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it is not happening, and they are literally making it up day to day as they go along.
So this if that assessment is true, then the sad conclusion is that the troops that are currently being sent down there now only have a choice between prison and the coffin.
Right. There was a interesting TikTok video from a stripper who's located near one of these military bases, and she was describing the fatalistic attitude. The troops are coming in, and it's like eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die kind of attitude. And she was sad about it because she had not seen that before. So, and this is really the first.
Die for what? Die for what?
That's a good question. Die
Horrible.
die to make Israel more secure, maybe? The what and as a political scientist, this is, and the students you're teaching who are maybe going on to get a PhD, man, they got all sorts of PhD material out of this.
Yeah.
Well, what's coming up? Because what we're witnessing is it's like it's a collision of 20th century systems coming up against 21st century systems. And I give you two example of the 20th century systems that no longer are relevant in the 21st century. High-rise office buildings and aircraft carriers. What do they have in common? Well, the high-rise buildings made sense when people did not have access to the internet. You couldn't do Zoom calls like we're doing now. We don't have to meet in person. We could have the same conversation this way. It'd be just as effective, without a hug or a handshake. Uh, and now you've got all of these high-rise buildings that have been built in places like Dubai, like Doha, like Bahrain, that are empty. What are they good for? There's not these massive companies that have to employ a lot of people at the same time that AI is coming online and is able to do the jobs that some of these office workers used to do. So you've now got these city skylines that are filled with these all giant office towers that are virtually empty. They're no longer relevant in the 21st century. Similarly with the aircraft carrier, the Ford, they spent 14 billion, $15 billion to build that. Excuse me. And in the 20th century, that aircraft carrier could sell up close to the coast of a country. Its planes could then launch from that and get deep penetration into the country. So it was really it was feared. It was a formidable weapon. Now it's got to stay hundreds of miles offshore, and even then, like it was some missiles that Russia and China have go past that 1,000-mile range. So those ships are now vulnerable, and they can be easily taken out. And in fact, that's what we've seen has happened. We had 2 aircraft carriers in the vicinity, the Abraham Lincoln, who, it mysteriously withdrew. Well, Trump admitted the other day it had been attacked from 17 sides. Now, I didn't know there was such a thing as 17 sides, but no, it was attacked, and it had to withdraw because it was too dangerous to stay close. And similarly with the Gerald R. Ford, the story of, the dryer lint caught on fire, and it took them 30 hours to put that out. There's other information that's come from Russian intelligence that says, no, it was hit. And as such, it couldn't stay. It was hit, and the damage that was done to the rear of the ship made it impossible to actually, raise and lower the elevators to get airplanes up onto the deck. Now, whether true or not, the reality is Iran does have missiles that can reach those ships if they're within 500 miles of the shore.
Yeah.
So, what again? We're here dealing with 20th century technology. It's the same kind of phenomena we saw, that the importance of horse cavalry in the 19th century. By the end of the First World War, they recognized horse cavalry was really no longer it didn't make sense. It was too, apart from the logistics requirements of having to have enough feed to keep the horses healthy, and they were susceptible to gunshots in ways that they had never been before, with machine guns and high explosives. So we're in this transition period, and the the petrodollar, which has reigned supreme now for 54 years, is at an end, because it's no longer the United States setting the price of oil. Now here's this upstart Iran, which is setting the price of oil by controlling the flow out of the Persian Gulf. And there's nothing there's no magic switch the U.S. can flip. It's going to make an attempt militarily to try to change that equation. But you know what? I think there's not going to be a knockout blow. And no matter what damage they do to Iran, Iran will still retain the capability to attack any ship that gets out there in the channel.
Yeah.
And if they sink it, and then you're back to the insurance problem. The insurance companies are going to say, no, we're not insuring that. If you want to go on your own, go on your own, take your chance. And so this is going to grind the supply chains to a screeching halt.
Yeah. You had an open faucet. You forced Iran to close that. And whenever you try to take its hand away from the faucet, I mean, they just slap your hand and you have
Yeah.
you have to take it away. It's like, okay. Well, that seems to be the name of the game. Larry, thank you very much for all of those insights. That was fantastic again. We'll have you back on the show. Everybody who wants to follow Larry, you should go to sonar21.com, right?
.com, that's it.
Sonar21.
21.com.
Follow Larry Johnson. They threw him off YouTube, but luckily he's coming on all of these shows, and you can follow him and his writing on sonar21.com. Larry Johnson, thank you so much for your time today.
Hey, thanks, Pascal. And look, I'm not a hateful guy, but I just, I don't like to accept the government explanations at face value because if more often than not, every government lies about what it's doing, especially when it's involved with a war.
Naturally, naturally, that's what they have to. I mean, anyhow, but I'm very glad for analysis like yours. Thank you so much.
Hey, thank you, my friend.